The power went out across campus, and I was on the corner landing of a library staircase. That's when I slammed head first into the one person at Blackwood University you don't ever touch, our legendary ice queen, Isabel Sterling. Not only did I knock her to the ground, but in the frantic scramble of darkness and tangled limbs, my hand landed somewhere it absolutely shouldn't have. A dead, suffocating silence fell around us. This was the woman who had rejected the captain of the football team, Blake Huntington, 300 times. The woman whose obsessive cleanliness was so extreme she was rumored to use sterling silver tweezers to handle a piece of paper. In that moment, I mentally drafted my withdrawal application. The next day, I was summoned to the president's office. Isabel and her father, the chairman of the university's board of trustees, were watching me with the same cold, analytical stare. "There are three options," Isabel began, her voice entirely devoid of warmth. "1. My father makes you disappear from this university and, as a bonus, bankrupts your entire family. 2. You become my boyfriend, effective immediately, until I get bored. 3. She pulled a medical-grade scalpel from her designer handbag and traced a line in the air in front of my face. "I've been acing my anatomy class. I'm in need of a new specimen." She leaned in. "You can choose. Or, I can choose for you." My knees gave out. I lunged forward and hugged her father's leg. "Mr. Sterling." "Sir, I'll take full responsibility for her." Chairman Sterling's pants were made of an expensive, impeccably tailored fabric. But as I clung to it, all I felt was a bone-deep chill. He kicked me away as if I were something vile he'd stepped in. "Pathetic," he hissed. I landed in a heap on the polished floor. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the barest hint of a curve on Isabel Sterling's lips. It wasn't a smile. It was the quiet satisfaction of a hunter watching her prey walk straight into a snare. A document slapped me in the face. "Sign it," she commanded. It was a relationship agreement. Article 1. Subject must report his whereabouts 24/7. Margin of error not to exceed 5 minutes. Article 2. Subject must install a location tracking app on his phone and be available for video confirmation at all times. Article 3. Subject is forbidden from making eye contact with any other female for more than 10 seconds, or exchanging more than 3 sentences of conversation. Article 99. Final interpretation of all articles resides solely with Isabel Sterling. This was an agreement. It was a contract for indentured servitude. I picked up the pen, my hand trembling violently. Isabel picked up a sleek metal pen from the president's desk and twirled it in front of my eyes. She clicked the top, and instead of a ballpoint, a small, gleaming scalpel blade emerged with a soft snick. The razor-sharp tip grew larger and larger in my reflection. "Sign, or don't." I stopped hesitating. I grabbed the pen and scribbled my name on the final page. Liam Carter. Satisfied, she retracted the document and pulled a black card from her purse, tossing it onto the floor in front of me. "An Amex Centurion. Pin, is your birthday." I froze. I can't take this. A man's dignity. It was the last thing I had left. Her eyes went arctic. She spun the scalpel pen between her fingers, its metal humming faintly. "Take it." I practically dove for the card, clutching it in my hand like a lifeline. Thank you, Isabel." Dignity. What the hell is that? Does it pay for tuition? My first official duty was to have lunch with her. The location, the campus dining hall. It was the peak of the lunch rush, a chaotic sea of students. When Isabel Sterling, carrying a lunch tray, sat down directly across from me, the entire hall fell silent, as if someone had hit a universal mute button. Every single I was locked on our small table. I wanted to bury my face in my mashed potatoes. What made it exponentially worse was when she pulled a small, velvet line case from her bag. Inside were 2 pairs of silver tweezers. With painstaking precision, she used one pair to pick up a single green bean and bring it to her lips. Then she used the other pair for a piece of barbecued rib. The students around us were staring like we were a bizarre new exhibit at the zoo. I could feel my social life flatlining. In that moment, it was over. My reputation was dead. My nerves were so shot that my hand twitched, and a single, greasy drop of gravy flew from my fork and landed on her pristine white skirt. A tiny, brown flower of grease bloomed on the fabric. I was finished. The very air in the world seemed to freeze solid. Isabel's movement stopped. She slowly lowered her head, her gaze fixed on the stain. Her expression became colder than a Siberian winter. A single thought echoed in my brain. Where did I put my withdrawal application? Should I be writing a will? Just as I braced for my execution, my body moved before my brain could. I whipped a napkin out of my pocket. I didn't just scrub at it. I folded it precisely into a small square. Using one corner, I gently dabbed the center of the stain, letting the paper absorb the grease. Then, using a clean corner, I blotted from the outside of the stain inward. The entire process took less than 5 seconds. The stain vanished, leaving behind only the faintest watermark. Only after I was done did I realize I was drenched in a cold sweat. Across from me, Isabel was frozen. She was staring at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine astonishment in those perpetually icy eyes. I couldn't meet her gaze. I stared at my plate and mumbled an explanation. I've seen you do it before. I know how you like to handle stains like that. I had seen her weeks ago in the library use the exact same technique to clean a drop of coffee that had spilled on a book. She said nothing, just silently resumed eating with her tweezers. That meal tasted like ash in my mouth. But later that afternoon, I got a text. It was a photo of my relationship agreement. The clause detailing the punishment for soiling of apparel, copying her anatomy notes by hand 100 times, had been aggressively crossed out with a thick red line. A strange feeling washed over me, something I couldn't quite name. Late that night, my phone lit up again. It was a text from her, brief and to the point. "Were the clothes I bought for you tomorrow." Attached was a picture of an expensive-looking men's outfit, perfectly arranged on a hanger. Its style was completely alien to the plaid shirts and worn-out jeans that fill my closet. The next day, I was the center of the university's attention. The outfit was impeccably tailored from some kind of ridiculously soft material. But on me, it looked like a kid playing dress-up in his father's clothes. Whispers followed me across the quad. "Look, that's Liam Carter, the guy Isabel Sterling bought. I don't get it. He's so average. How did he hook up with the Ice Queen? Hook up. He's a pet. Look at that outfit. Doesn't he look like some boy toy for a rich heiress?" The words were like needles, piercing straight through me. I kept my head down, trying to get to my lecture hall as fast as possible. A figure blocked my path. It was Blake Huntington, star quarterback, and a man Isabel had rejected 300 times. He was flanked by a few of his hulking lineman buddies, all of them smirking. Well, if it isn't Liam. You can put a monkey in a suit, but it's still a monkey," Blake sneered, looking me up and down with open contempt. "I hear you're Isabel's new puppy. How about you bark for us?" His friends roared with laughter. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. "Get out of my way," I bit out. "Ooh, he's got a temper." Blake shoved me hard in the shoulder. "Who the hell do you think you are, talking to me like that?" I stumbled backward, my backpack sliding off my shoulder and hitting the pavement. Just take it, I told myself. For my parents, for my younger sister still in high school. I had to just take it. I bent down to pick up my bag, bracing for the inevitable beating. A hand landed on my backpack first. I looked up and saw Isabel. She had appeared out of nowhere, as silent as a shadow. Behind her stood 2 men in black suits, their posture calm and professional. They were clearly bodyguards. The entire quad went quiet. Isabel didn't even look at Blake. She knelt, pulled a pristine white handkerchief from her purse, and, in front of everyone, meticulously wiped away a speck of dust from my cheek where Blake's hand had touched me. Her movements were light, imbued with an undeniable sense of possession. Once she was finished, she stood up and finally turned her cold gaze on Blake Huntington. "My property. Are you qualified to touch him?" Blake's face cycled through shades of red and white. He clearly never expected Isabel to defend me. "Isabel, don't let this guy fool you. He's a nobody from nowhere. He's after your money. He doesn't deserve you." Isabel laughed. It was a strange, unsettling sound, like a frozen lake cracking open to reveal the frigid darkness below before instantly freezing over again. "Whether he deserves me or not is for me to decide. But you," she said, her voice dropping, "can be expelled from this university, effective immediately." She took out her phone. She dialed a number and said only 2 words. "The Huntingtons." Less than 30 seconds later, Blake's phone began to ring frantically. He answered it, and the color drained from his face. A man's terrified, apoplectic roar blasted from the earpiece, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "You goddamn idiot. Out of everyone you could have picked a fight with, you chose a Sterling? You get on your knees and apologize right now, or our family is finished." Blake stood there, his hand shaking so hard he could barely hold his phone. He looked at Isabel, his eyes filled with a mixture of terror and disbelief. I'm sorry," he stammered, his head bowed in humiliation. His voice was barely a whisper. "Leave," was all Isabel said. Blake and his pack of goons practically fell over each other as they scrambled to get away. The crowd of onlookers dispersed just as quickly, terrified of drawing the attention of this terrifying woman. The wide, tree-lined path was suddenly empty, except for me, her, and the two bodyguards. I looked at her, my mind a chaotic mess of emotions. She, however, was focused solely on my face, her brow furrowed. "Where did he touch you? We need to disinfect that when we get back." In that moment, for the first time, I thought that being so possessively owned by her might not be such a bad thing after all. As a reward for my good performance, Isabel took me to her private lounge. It was on the top floor of the library, in a section that had never been opened to the public. The room was massive, decorated in a minimalist, cold-tone style. It was spotless, and the air smelled faintly of antiseptic. It was very her. But my attention was immediately captured by a single bookshelf in the corner. The entire shelf held only one object, a worn, old sketchbook. My heart skipped a beat. The cover of that sketchbook had a tree carved into it, a design I had etched myself with a utility knife. It was my sketchbook, the one I had lost back in my freshman year of high school. How did it get here? My mind went completely blank. Isabel walked to the bookshelf and picked it up. Then, right in front of me, she slowly opened it. The first page was a sketch of her back as she gave a speech at a school assembly. The second was a profile of her reading a book on the bleachers by the basketball court. The third was a drawing of her in the cafeteria, meticulously using her chopsticks to pick onions out of her food. The entire book was filled with drawings of her. Dozens of sketches in dozens of different scenarios. It was the great secret of my freshman year, a one-sided crush I thought no one in the world knew about. Now, that secret was being laid bare by its subject. I was terrified, my body frozen solid. I had no idea what to do. I expected this to be the prelude to my execution. I imagined she would use that scalpel to carve the words "delusional fool" into my skin. This one, she spoke suddenly, pointing to a drawing of her sitting by the library window, reading, her face cast in profile. Why did this one take the longest to draw? Her voice was calm, betraying no emotion. I felt like an invisible hand was squeezing my throat. Fear and shame washed over me, so intense I thought I might pass out. But I knew that lying to her would be far worse. My voice trembling, I told her the truth. Because the sunlight was perfect that day. It was in your hair, and you looked soft. After I said it, I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the explosion. But the judgment I expected never came. There was only a long, heavy silence. I peeked through a tiny slit and saw her reach out a finger. Gently, almost reverently, she traced the outline of the girl in the drawing, the one bathed in sunlight. The next second, she was walking toward me. The sharp click of her heels on the floor sounded like a hammer striking my heart. She stopped right in front of me, enveloping me in her signature, cool fragrance. Then she leaned in and whispered in my ear, a soft, dreamlike murmur that only I could hear. "So, you were mine, even back then." Boom. My brain short-circuited. What did that mean? Before I could process it, she reached out and, for the first time, took my hand. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a command. She interlaced her fingers with mine. Her palm was cool, like a piece of polished jade. But that coolness sent a searing heat through me, making my heart hammer against my ribs. My mind flashed back to the power outage on the stairs, the sudden embrace, the accidental touch. In that instant, all the coincidences clicked into place, forming a single, terrifyingly clear picture. The accident on the stairs was no accident at all. I was completely stunned, my brain feeling like a scrambled mess. What? What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely working. That sketchbook. And that day, Isabel didn't answer directly. She led me by the hand out of the lounge and back to the very staircase where my fate had been sealed. Now, in the bright light of day, it looked like nothing more than an ordinary corner landing. "Let's reconstruct the scene of the crime," she said, her expression as clinical as a medical examiner's. That day, I checked the weather forecast in advance. A severe convective storm system was moving in, with a high risk of thunderstorms. She continued, "I also accessed the university's maintenance records for the electrical grid. This entire circuit is 5 years past its recommended replacement date. During any major storm, there is a 70% probability of a power failure." My heart began to sink. "You have a habit of studying in the C-Wing reading room on the 3rd floor of the library, and you typically leave 1 hour before closing. To get from that reading room to your dorm, this staircase is the most direct route." That afternoon, on the table directly across from your usual seat, I placed a long out-of-print, first edition copy of a book on architectural theory I knew you'd been searching for. A jolt went through me. I had been looking for that book for months. When I saw it that day, I just thought I'd gotten incredibly lucky. That book was enough to keep you there later than usual. I calculated that by the time you closed it and left, you would be walking into the peak of the thunderstorm. Her voice was flat and methodical, but it sent a chill creeping on my spine. How deep did this woman's machinations go? She looked at me, her eyes boring into mine as she delivered the most unnerving detail. "I stood right here, counting your footsteps. I knew that the moment the power cut out, the sudden darkness would cause a brief moment of disorientation. Your pace descending the stairs would quicken involuntarily. Even the angle at which you would collide with me, and the exact place your hand would accidentally land, were all within my calculations." She paused, then delivered the final, devastating piece of the puzzle. "Only under those specific circumstances would my father believe I had suffered a grave insult, that I had been so brazenly violated by a male student. And only then," she concluded, "would he agree to my seemingly absurd and vindictive condition, forcing you to be my boyfriend." The world spun around me. All of it, from the very beginning, was an elaborate, perfectly executed play. I wasn't some clumsy oaf who caused an accident. I was a prop, carefully selected and maneuvered to step precisely into her trap. But why? I finally managed to ask the most important question. "Why would you go to all that trouble?" She didn't answer. Instead, she asked me a question of her own. "Liam, back in your freshman year of high school, at the Founders Gala, backstage, did you or did you not help a girl who tripped on the hem of her gown and twisted her ankle?" My mind was violently pulled back to that chaotic night years ago. The lighting backstage was dim. People were rushing everywhere. I did remember a girl in an elaborate gown. She was wearing a mask, so I never saw her face clearly. She'd sprained her ankle and was sitting in a corner, panicking. I was just passing by. She looked so distressed that I grabbed a first aid kit and helped her clean the scrape. I even used a silver twist tie from a nearby gift box to rig an ice pack to her ankle. A moment later, a teacher called for her, and she was gone. I never saw her again. I had always considered it a completely insignificant moment. Isabel watched my expression as the memory returned. Then, she slowly raised her left wrist. She was always wearing an expensive-looking watch. Now she unclasped it. There, on her skin, alongside the faint impression left by the watch, was a simple, unassuming bracelet braided from a thin silver cord. The style was crude, and the knot was a clumsy but secure dead knot that I had invented myself. She held her wrist out for me to see. "That girl," she said softly, "was me." I felt like I had been struck by lightning. I was completely paralyzed, frozen to the spot. After the revelation, the atmosphere between us became incredibly strange. The fear was still there, but now it was tangled with shock, a bizarre kind of gratitude, and a profound sense of being utterly out of my depth. I looked at this girl, this cold, obsessive, brilliant girl, who had orchestrated such a monumental hunt, all because of a small, forgotten act of kindness from years ago. I had no idea what to say. After a long silence, I summoned every ounce of courage I possessed. "So, since we're officially boyfriend and girlfriend now," I scratched the back of my head. "Should we, go on a date, like normal couples do?" She glanced at me and gave a single, curt nod. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding, about to suggest a movie or a walk in the park. But the destination she chose made the smile freeze on my face. The Science Museum, specifically the Human Anatomy exhibit. What could I say? I gritted my teeth and went with her. The museum was crowded that weekend, but the anatomy exhibit, full of preserved human bodies and organs, was eerily empty. I stared at the muscles, bones, and viscera floating in formaldehyde, my stomach churning. Isabel, however, was fascinated. She browsed the displays as if she were at a Tiffany's. She even pointed to a full skeletal specimen to give me an impromptu lesson. Look here. The articulation between the humerus and the ulna shows signs of a minor dislocation. The fixation wasn't done professionally. I just nodded along, trying not to vomit. Suddenly, a loud, piercing shriek echoed from the hallway outside. It was a child having a tantrum. It was just a normal sound, but the effect on Isabel was immediate and violent. The color drained from her face, and her body began to tremble uncontrollably. Beads of cold sweat broke out on her forehead. I remembered reading her file, something about a severe case of post-traumatic stress disorder. Without a second thought, I grabbed her hand and practically dragged her out of the exhibit. "It's okay, you're okay," I said, pulling her into a quiet, deserted alcove. I covered her ears with my hands, pulling her into my arms to shield her from the outside world. Her body felt like a leaf in a storm, shaking violently against my chest. It took a long time for the trembling to subside. There, in that quiet corner, she finally showed me the vulnerability hidden beneath the iceberg. She told me that when she was a little girl, she had been kidnapped by one of her father's business rivals. She was locked in a pitch-black basement. In the room next door, the kidnapper's own child had screamed and cried for 3 days and 3 nights straight. That sharp, hopeless wail became the soundtrack to her lifelong nightmare. After that, I never trusted anyone again, she said, her voice a faint, trembling whisper. The only things I believe in are absolute control and the power I can hold in my own 2 hands. Hearing her words, my heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. Her obsessive cleanliness, her cold detachment, her suffocating need for control, it all stemmed from this. It wasn't her personality. It was a suit of armor she had built around herself to survive. I tightened my embrace, my voice filled with a conviction that surprised even me. "From now on," I whispered, "I'll protect you." Her trembling stopped. She buried her face in my chest and mumbled, her voice so quiet I could barely hear it. "Don't you dare lie to me. If you lie to me, I really will turn you into a specimen, so you can stay with me forever." That bloody, terrifying threat in that one moment sounded like the most beautiful declaration of love I had ever heard. The peace didn't last. Blake Huntington's revenge came swiftly. Under pressure from the Sterling family, he hadn't been expelled, but he had been utterly humiliated in front of the entire school. He blamed me for all of it. He dug into my family's background and found out about my younger sister, who had been frail and sick since childhood. She was in and out of the hospital, racking up enormous medical bills. One afternoon, he cornered me behind the lecture hall. This time, he didn't use his fists. He pulled a check from his wallet and dangled it in front of my face. $1 million. Take the money and get the hell out of Isabel's life. I stared at the check. That number was enough to cover my sister's medical treatments for the next several years. It would be a lie to say I wasn't tempted. Seeing my hesitation, Blake smirked and leaned in close. "Don't be a fool. If you say no, well, I can't touch a sterling, but I have plenty of ways to make sure your sister's stay in the hospital becomes unpleasant. A mix-up with her medication, a little accident during a procedure. These things are very easy to arrange for people like us." His words were like venom, coiling in my ear. My blood ran cold. This was a direct, unambiguous threat. I looked at his smug, confident face, and a tidal wave of fury rose inside me. On the outside, however, I let my expression crumble into one of greed and cowardice. I reached out and took the check. "Fine, you win," I said, looking at the ground, my voice full of defeat. I'll leave her." Blake laughed, a triumphant, ugly sound. He patted my cheek condescendingly. "That's more like it. You should know your place. A broke nobody like you has no business dreaming." He didn't know that as he handed me the check, my phone, resting in my pocket, was already recording. Blake couldn't wait to see the look on Isabel's face. He immediately snapped a picture of me holding the check and sent it to her from an anonymous number with a gloating message. Your new boyfriend sold you out for $1,000,000. So much for true love. I timed it perfectly, just as I knew Isabel would be seeing that photo, just as that familiar destructive storm would be gathering in her eyes. I sent her an audio file. The recording was crystal clear. First, my voice. Thanks for the money. This should be just enough to get Isabel that heart-of-the-ocean diamond she was admiring at the auction last week. Then, Blake's sputtering, furious voice. You're playing me? And finally, my own calm voice. Oh, and by the way, that threat you just made against my sister. I've recorded all of it. I wonder, if Chairman Sterling were to hear this, would the Huntington family still have a future in Boston? The recording ended. I walked out to find Isabel standing there, her face a mask of cold fury. Blake was nearby, having just received a frantic call, looking like a deer in the headlights. In front of both of them, I took the $1,000,000 check, ripped it in half, and then tore it into tiny pieces, letting them scatter in the wind. Compared to your money, I said, walking to Isabel's side and looking Blake dead in the eye. I much prefer using hers. The storm in Isabel's eyes vanished instantly. In its place was a look I had never seen before, a blazing, intense light that felt hot enough to melt me. This was the first time I hadn't been passively protected by her. This time, I had solved the problem for her. After the check incident, Isabel's love for me escalated to a new, suffocating level. She effectively kidnapped me, taking me to her family's private villa in the suburbs. The official reason was to protect my safety and eliminate all potential threats. The villa was a massive, luxurious mansion, a gilded cage. She had a room prepared for me, furnished with everything I could possibly want. But I quickly discovered that all the windows were made of one-way glass. I could see the manicured gardens in the sky, but no one from the outside could see in. My phone was confiscated and replaced with a custom device. It had only one contact, Isabel Sterling. The internet was restricted to a handful of academic websites she had personally approved. She forbade me from eating takeout or cafeteria food. She now prepared all 3 of my meals herself, each one with calories, proteins, and vitamins calculated down to the microgram. She was more rigorous than a celebrity nutritionist. I was her prize canary, stripped of all freedom. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Isabel, this isn't protection. This is a prison. I yelled. She was sterilizing a new set of scalpels with an alcohol wipe. She paused, her movements ceasing. She walked over and pinned me against the cold wall, her beautiful eyes swirling with a dangerous, obsessive light. The freedom you want. Is it freedom for me? Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of a collapsing mountain. I looked at her, at my own small, helpless reflection in her dark pupils. With difficulty, I shook my head no. The dangerous glint in her eyes vanished, replaced by a satisfied smile. She stood on her toes and gave me a soft kiss on the forehead, like she was rewarding a well-behaved child. Good boy, she whispered. It's too dangerous outside. The only safe place in the world is right here, with me. Living in this twisted dynamic, however, I started noticing strange things. For instance, her extreme misophobia seemed to apply only to the outside world, not to me. She would eat leftovers from my plate without a second thought, drink from my glass of water. I suddenly understood. Her obsession with cleanliness wasn't a quirk. It was a shield to keep the world out. And I was on the inside of that shield. I began to test the limits, to use her own rules to train her in reverse. One evening, she made a dish I didn't particularly like. I deliberately didn't touch it. She didn't get angry. She just sat across from me, watching me in silence. We were locked in a standoff for a full half hour. In the end, she was the one who broke. She took my plate away, her voice tinged with an anxiety she probably didn't even recognize herself. What do you want to eat? I'll make you something else. In that moment, I smiled. In the twisted push and pull of our relationship, our bond was strengthening, heating up in its own strange, dysfunctional way. I was no longer just her prey, her possession. I had also found the key to controlling her. I thought that as long as I stayed by her side, we could continue like this forever. But Isabel's father, Chairman Sterling, had other ideas. He summoned me for another meeting. This time, Isabel wasn't there. We met in a private room at an exclusive downtown club. He sat at the head of the table, studying me like an insect under a microscope. "Young man, this game is over," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "I'll admit, you have a certain cleverness about you. But you and Isabel do not belong in the same world." He slid a check across the table. It had one more zero than the one Blake had offered me. $10 million. "Take this money and leave Boston. I can guarantee your admission to a top university abroad. After you graduate, you can do whatever you want. All you have to do is disappear completely from Isabel's life." I looked at the check but didn't touch it. I raised my head and met his gaze directly. "Sir, I love Isabel, not your money." Chairman Sterling let out a cold, humorless laugh, as if I had just told the world's most idiotic joke. "Love? And what will you provide her with? Do you have any idea that we have already arranged a marriage for her? The other family is from New York. Their influence will elevate the Sterling empire to a new level. Compared to him, you're not even worthy of polishing his shoes." His words were like a bucket of ice water dumped over my head. "If you refuse to leave on your own," his voice hardened, "I have ways of making people like you simply vanish." The pressure in the room was suffocating. Just as I felt I was about to be crushed by it, the door to the room was thrown open. Isabel stood in the doorway, her face pale, but her eyes blazing with defiance. She had clearly heard everything. She strode past her father, put herself between us, and shielded me with her body like a lioness protecting her cub. She stared down her own father, and, for the first time, spoke to him in a tone of open rebellion. "He's my man. No one touches him. An arranged marriage? Over my dead body." Without another word, she grabbed my hand and pulled me from the room, never looking back. Her palm was damp with cold sweat. I could feel that she was terrified, but she hadn't backed down an inch. It was the first time she had ever stood up to her entire family for me. I squeezed her hand tightly. I realized then that our future was going to be far more difficult than I had ever imagined. The so-called fiancé from New York arrived soon after. His name was Julian Astor III, a scion of some real estate dynasty. He was handsome, impeccably dressed, and carried himself with the effortless arrogance of someone who had never been told no. He came directly to the villa and, right in front of me, presented Isabel with a ridiculously large bouquet of chemically dyed blue roses. "Isabel, darling, I heard you enjoy your privacy. This villa is quaint, but a bit small, don't you think? I have an estate in the Hamptons. We could go riding." He acted as if I were completely invisible, just part of the furniture. Isabel didn't even glance at him. She spoke 2 words, her voice like ice. "Get out." Julian didn't seem offended. He just smiled. "That's fine. We have plenty of time." He began using his family's influence to put pressure on Chairman Sterling. A major development project for the Sterling Corporation was suddenly tied up in regulatory hell. I saw Isabel standing alone on the balcony one evening, staring into the distance, a weariness in her expression that I had never seen before. My heart ached for her. I decided I couldn't stand by passively any longer. I couldn't hide behind her while she fought all the battles alone. I started to think like her. Using the access and resources Isabel had given me, I quietly began digging into Julian Astor III. It didn't take long to discover that behind the polished facade, his private life was a cesspool of depravity. He had a particular and illegal taste for vulnerable-looking college girls. I found a struggling actress who was desperate for money and offered her a generous sum. Then I arranged a little piece of theater. Posing as a naive college student, the actress lured Julian to a suite at the Four Seasons. At the same time, I anonymously tipped off both Julian's father and Chairman Sterling about a sensitive business leak that required their immediate and discreet attention at that very hotel. When they opened the door to the suite, they walked in on a scene of utter chaos, with Julian and several other college girls engaged in activities that would make a Roman emperor blush. The flash of a camera, prearranged by me, went off, capturing his ugly deeds for posterity. I stood in a building across the street, watching it all unfold through a pair of binoculars, my expression calm. When you do something, do it cleanly and decisively. Leave no loose ends. Isabel had taught me that. The engagement was naturally called off. The Astor family was so humiliated they practically begged the Sterlings not to press charges. When I returned to the villa, Isabel was in her study, methodically cleaning and polishing her collection of surgical instruments. In the lamplight, her profile was as cold and beautiful as ever, but tinged with a deep vulnerability. I walked up behind her and gently wrapped my arms around her. Her body went rigid. I leaned in and whispered in her ear, "Your hands were made for holding scalpels to save lives. From now on, I'll do the dirty work." Slowly, inch by inch, the tension left her body. She relaxed into my embrace. She reached back and covered my hand with her own, a complex, knowing smile in her voice. "Liam Carter," she murmured. "You're learning." I smiled back. I learned from the best. In that moment, I felt like our relationship had finally become one of equals. We thought that by removing Julian, we had bought ourselves some peace. But we both underestimated Blake Huntington's capacity for madness. Broken by the repeated humiliations, his mind had snapped. He became obsessed, digging relentlessly into Isabel's past like a rabid dog, searching for anything he could use to destroy her completely. And he found it. He unearthed the sealed records from her childhood kidnapping. He leaked every sordid, buried detail to the trashiest online tabloids. Eris's dark secret. Held captive for 3 days of unspeakable horror, Ice Queen's mass shatters. Is her obsessive cleanliness a sign of a broken mind? The vile headlines, accompanied by grainy, leaked crime scene photos, went viral. The internet exploded. The public reaction was a toxic stew of pity, morbid curiosity, and malicious speculation. It all came crashing down on Isabel. The cyberbullying campaign triggered her PTSD on a catastrophic scale. She locked herself in her room, drew all the curtains, and refused to see or speak to anyone. She wouldn't eat. She wouldn't drink. I stood outside her door, my heart tearing itself apart, but no amount of knocking or pleading could get her to open it. The dead silence from within was the most terrifying sound I had ever heard. I didn't waste time trying to fight the online rumors. You can't scrub the internet clean, and you can't silence millions of gossips. Instead, I made a desperate, insane decision. I took the $1 million from Blake's original check. I had never cashed it, and combined it with the funds from Isabel's black card. Through some very discreet channels, I located the lead kidnapper from all those years ago. He was a middle-aged man, recently released from prison. My contacts escorted the man to the villa. I didn't hit him. I didn't threaten him. I simply made him kneel outside Isabel's bedroom door. Then, I handed him a script I had written through the night. I made him read it over and over, his voice loud and clear. The script was a story I had invented. A story about how, years ago, a brilliant and methodical high school student had secretly uncovered the kidnapper's plot, manipulated events from the shadows, and ultimately led the police to his capture. That high school student, the story claimed, was me. Standing outside her locked door, I gathered all the air in my lungs and shouted, "Isabel, do you hear that? The man who hurt you. I was already hunting him 10 years ago. I didn't just show up in your life now. The truth is, I was always there, watching over you." It was a confession built on a foundation of lies and truth. I had no idea if she would believe it. It was the only way I could think of to pull her back from the abyss. After my final shout, I sagged against the wall, exhausted, my heart pounding as I waited. 1 second, 2 seconds. The lock clicked. The door opened. Isabel stood there. Her face was ashen, her hair was a mess, and her eyes were red-rimmed and brimming with tears as she stared at me. After her recovery, Isabel was a different person. The ice in her eyes had melted completely, replaced by an unconditional trust and reliance on me. She looked at me as if I were her entire world. Chairman Sterling had also witnessed everything I had done, particularly the unorthodox, borderline criminal methods I had used to pull his daughter back from the brink of a complete breakdown. His attitude toward me finally began to soften. He understood, at last, that the cure for Isabel's pain wasn't a strategic marriage or a fortress of material wealth. It was a person who could see past her armor and was willing to get his hands dirty, to go a little mad for her sake. Once the storm had passed, Isabel prepared to deliver her final judgment on Blake Huntington. She was ready to mobilize the full weight of the Sterling Empire to make him and his entire family vanish from the face of the earth. But before she could make the call, I stopped her. "This time, I said, I didn't use violence or money. For someone like Blake, who defined himself by his social standing, the most devastating revenge wasn't physical destruction, but social death. I spent 3 days compiling an exhaustive file on every rule he had ever broken, every student he had ever bullied, from his first day of high school to the present. I documented his use of hired thugs, his campaigns of slander and rumors, even some minor financial misdeeds. I submitted the entire dossier, under my own name, to the university's disciplinary board and the local police department. Simultaneously, I leaked the story to several influential journalists, framing Blake not as a spurned lover, but as a textbook case of a malicious, hate-fueled cyberbully. With irrefutable evidence and mounting public pressure, Blake was finished. He was facing not only serious legal charges, but had also become a social pariah overnight. His father's company, tainted by the scandal, saw its stock price plummet, teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. I had used the most civilized of weapons to bring about his total annihilation. When it was all over, I went with Isabel to see her father again. This time, the way Chairman Sterling looked at me was completely different. There was still scrutiny, still surprise, but there was something else there too: respect. He finally realized that I not only had the heart to love his daughter, but also the cunning and the ruthlessness to protect her. He was silent for a long time. At last, he looked at me and said the words I never thought I would hear. "Leaving Isabel in your hands. I can finally rest easy." All the storms had passed. My life with Isabel settled into a strange new normal, a mix of sweetness and our own brand of macabre stability. She would still, on occasion, pull out that scalpel pen and gesture with it. But now, the threats had changed. If you ignore me again, I'll have to dissect your heart to confirm that it's completely filled with me. Her cleanliness obsession remained, but she now allowed me to sleep in her bed, provided I showered 3 times first. After I graduated from Blackwood, I turned down Chairman Sterling's offer of a cushy executive position at his company. Instead, I applied to medical school right alongside Isabel. "I want to enter your world," I told her. "I want to understand every part of you." She looked at me, her eyes shining brighter than any star. Years later, we became a renowned surgical team in our field. I was the lead surgeon, she was my first assistant, and our work in the operating room was like a flawless symphony. One evening, after a grueling 10-hour surgery, everyone else had left. We were alone in the vast, quiet operating room. As I was stripping off my surgical gown, she came up behind me and wrapped her arms around my waist, holding me tightly. She leaned in and whispered in my ear, her voice that familiar, cool, clinical tone, but now laced with a smile. "Liam, I have 3 options for you." I heard the familiar opening line and turned around, a smile on my own face. 1, you marry me. 2, I marry you. 3, we go to the courthouse and sign the papers right now. She blinked, stunned for a moment, and then she laughed. It was the most beautiful smile I had ever seen in my life. It was like a glacier that had been frozen for 1,000 years, suddenly thawing in the spring sun, revealing a valley of wildflowers beneath. She didn't answer me. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her white coat and pulled something out. It wasn't a scalpel. It wasn't a ring. It was an exquisitely crafted display case made of glass and black velvet. A specimen box. I looked inside. There, resting on the velvet, was my old, worn sketchbook from freshman year, the one filled with drawings of her. Next to the sketchbook, in a small, custom-fitted indentation, was the first gift I had ever given her, the silver twist tie I had used to secure the ice pack to her ankle. She held the case out to me, her eyes locked on mine. She spoke each word with perfect, loving clarity. "There's no need to choose. You were always my most prized specimen, on permanent display in my heart.